this word is now becoming so common. Even the governments are beginning to use it. Even the people who want money are trying to meditate more to get more money. They are trying to meditate in order to become quiet so that they can do better business. And the doctors are practicing meditation because they will help them to operate properly, and so on and on and on and on. And there are different kinds of meditations: Zen, Tibetan, and the ones you invent for yourself. And with all this in mind, the Indian type of meditation, the Tibetan, the Zen, the encounter group meditation, and the aspiration to have a quiet, still, quiet, silent mind. Bearing all this in mind, let's try to find out, if we can this morning, what it is, why one should meditate, and what is the significance of meditation. This word has been recently been popularized from India. And people go to India and to Japan and other places in order to learn meditation, in order to practice meditation, in order to achieve some kind of result through meditation. Enlightenment, better understanding of themselves, have a peace of mind, whatever that may mean, and generally they have a little peace, but not peaceful mind. And the gurus have invented their own type of meditation, and so on and on and on. Right? I'm sure you're aware of all this. And of course there is the passing fad which is called transcendental meditation. It is really a form of siesta in the morning, siesta after lunch, siesta after dinner or before dinner, so that your mind kind of becomes quiet and you can do more mischief afterwards. So, consider all this, the various types and practices and systems, and question them. It is good to have doubt. It's good to be skeptical up to a certain point. Like a dog on the leash. You must let the dog go occasionally, run freely. So doubt, skepticism must be kept on a leash all the time, but often it must be allowed to run free. And most of us accept the authority of those who say, we know how to meditate, we will tell you all about it. So, please, we are together examining the whole problem or the whole question of what is meditation, not how to meditate. And then if you ask, how am I to meditate? Then you will find a system to meditate. The how implies a method. But whereas if you are inquiring into this question of what is meditation and why should one meditate, then we will never ask how to meditate. The very questioning, the very asking is the beginning of inquiry, which is the beginning of meditation. As we said, it's a very complex problem. And we have to go very slowly and hesitantly, but subtly into this question. As we said during the last week, that we are investigating, that we are inquiring into it, so that you are not listening to the speaker. You are asking the question to yourself and finding the right answer without accepting any kind of authority. Especially the authority of the speaker sitting on this unfortunate platform. It doesn't give him any authority because he sits on a platform and talks. There is no authority in so-called matters of spiritual matters, if I can use that word spiritual, in the matter of the spirit, in the matter of inquiry into something that demands very, very, very careful examination. So we are doing this together, not meditating together, but inquiring what is meditation. And from that, discover for oneself, as we go along, the whole movement of meditation. Is this all right? First, I think one must be careful in observing that meditation is not something that you do. Meditation is something entirely a movement into the whole question of our living. That's the first thing. How we live, how we behave, whether we have fears, anxieties, sorrows, we are pursuing everlastingly pleasure, whether we have built images about ourselves and about others. That is part of our life, and in the understanding of that life and of those various issues involved in life, and being free from those, actually being free, then we can proceed to inquire into what is meditation. That's why we have, for the last 10 days or last week, we have said we must put order in our house. Our house is ourselves. Complete order. Then, when that order is established, not according to a pattern, but when there is understanding, complete understanding of what is disorder, what is confusion, why we are in contradiction in ourselves, why there is this constant struggle between the opposites, and so on, which we have been talking about for the last 10 days or last week. having put that in order, our life in order, and the very placing things in their proper place is the beginning of meditation. Right? If we have not done that, actually, not theoretically, but in daily life, every moment of our life, then if you have not done that, then meditation is merely becomes another form of illusion, another form of prayer, another form of wanting something, money, position, refrigerator, and so on. So we are asking now, what is the movement of meditation? First of all, we must understand the importance of the senses. Most of us react or act according to the urges, demands, and the insistence of our senses. And those senses never act as a whole, but only as a part. Right? Please understand this, if you don't mind inquiring into this little more for yourselves, talking over together, that all our senses never function, move, operate as a whole, holistically. If you observe yourself and watch your senses, you will see that one or the other of the senses becomes dominant. One or the other of the senses takes greater part in observation, in our daily living. So there is always imbalance in our senses. Right? May we go on from there? Now, is it possible, this is part of meditation, what we are doing now. Is it possible for the senses to operate as a whole? To look at the movement of the sea, the bright waters, the eternally restless waters, to watch those waters complete with all your senses. Or a tree, or a person, or a bird in the flight, a sheet of water, the setting sun or the rising moon, to observe it, to look at it with all your senses fully awakened. If you do, then you discover for yourself, I'm not telling you, I'm not your authority, I'm not your guru, you're not my followers. Followers are the most destructive people. And the gurus too. If you observe this operation of the whole senses acting, you find there is no center from which the senses are moving. Are you trying this as we are talking over together? To look at your girl or your husband or your wife or the tree or the house with all the highly active, sensitive senses, then in that there is no limitation. If you try, you do it and you'll find out for yourself. That's the first thing one has to understand. The place of the senses. Because most of us operate on partial or particular sense. We never move or live with all our senses fully awakened, flowering. Because as most of us live, operate, and think partially. So one of our inquiries into this is for the senses to function fully and realize that the importance and the illusions that senses create. Are you following what this? And to give the senses their right place, which means not suppressing them, not controlling them, not running away from them, but to give the proper place to the senses. This is important because in meditation, if you want to go into it very deeply, unless one is aware of the senses, they create different forms of neurosis, different forms of illusions. They dominate in our emotions and so on, so on, so on. So that's the first thing to realize. When the senses are fully awakened, flowering, then the body becomes extraordinarily quiet. You haven't noticed all this? Or am I talking to myself? Because most of us forced our bodies to sit still, not fidget, not move about, and so on, Whereas if all the senses are functioning healthily, normally, vitally, then body relaxes and becomes very, very quiet. If you do it as we are talking. Then the question arises, because what is time? What is the place of time in meditation? And what is the place of control in meditation? May I go on? I hope we are meeting each other, are we? First, let's take whether it's possible to live a life, daily life, not occasionally, but live a life without any form of control. Which doesn't mean permissive activity or doing what one likes, rejecting traditional, all the modern young people are doing. There is no regret, no restraint, no control. Do what you want. which the old people do anyhow. Only the youth thinks that's their prerogative, something they have invented. Now we're asking a question. Please consider it seriously, whether it's possible to live a life without any form of control. Because when there is control, there is the action of will, right? You follow? So what is will? I will do this, I must not do that, or I should, in the future, must do that, and so on. The operation of will. So we have to inquire, what is will? Is will not desire? Is not will the essence of desire? Right? Please look at it. Don't reject it or accept it. Inquire into it. Because we are now asking whether it's possible to live a life in which there is not a shadow of control, which means not a shadow of the operation of will. And will is the very movement of desire. We went into the whole question of what is desire. I won't go into now because I have a lot to cover this morning. Desire is contact, perception, seeing, contact, sensation. From that arises desire and thought with its image. All that is desire, which we went into, but I won't go into now. And we're asking, is it possible to live without the action of will? Most of us live a life of restraint, control, suppression, and so on, escape on. And you have to ask, who is the controller? When you say, I must control myself, my anger, my jealousy, my laziness, my indolence, and so on, who is the controller? Is the controller different from that which he controls? You understand? Or are they both the same? The controller is the controlled. This probably is true. Is it all right? Do we understand? After all, you have listened to me for a week or 10 days. You by now, our language, our use of words must be quite common and understood. So, as long as there is a controller, he is exercising his capacity to control. And we are saying the controller is what he is, the essence of desire. And he is trying to control his activities, his thoughts, his wishes, and so on, so on. So realizing all that, can one live a life which is not promiscuous, which is not doing what you like, but a life without any form of control, either sexual and not indulgence, the will to control what you should not, and the whole problem of control. Very few people have gone into this question. And the whole Eastern form of meditation is partly control. And personally, I object to the whole their system of any form of control. But the mind then is never free, always subjugating itself to a pattern. Whether that pattern is established by another or by oneself. So, the senses, the control. Then we must ask, what is time? Not the scientific fiction, science fiction of time. What is, in our daily life, what is time? What part does it play in our life? How important is it in our daily activities? You understand my question? Of course, there is time by the watch. There is time according to the sun, the setting and the rising of the sun. There is time as yesterday, today and tomorrow. There is time as something that happened in the past, remembered and shaping the present and the future. Right? So there is physical, chronological time, and we have also psychological time. I will be. I must. I am violent. I will be non-violent. All that implies a movement of time. Right? Movement means time. Please understand this really very carefully, because we are going to inquire into meditation, which is whether the mind can be absolutely quiet without, in which time doesn't, as movement doesn't exist at all. You're following all that? Are you interested in all this? Even as intellectual curiosity? Because this is very important to understand, whether time, not chronological time, but psychological time, can that come to an end? Or must there be always till I die this movement of I will be, I must not be, I should be, I shall not be, regret, you follow? The whole psychological activity in which time is involved. That is, can time come to an end? Please see why it is important. Because our brains are conditioned to time. Our brains are the result of million years and more, how many, doesn't matter, immemorial, centuries upon centuries. The brain is conditioned. It has evolved, grown, flowered. It's a very, very ancient brain. And as it has evolved through time, evolution implies time, as it evolved, it functions in time. You understand? I wonder if you understand all this. The moment you say, I will, it's in time. When you say, I must do that, it's also in time. Everything that we do involves time. And our brains are conditioned to not only chronological time, sun rising, sun setting, but also to the psychological time. So the brain has evolved through millennia, and the very idea, very question whether it can end time, it is a, you follow, it is a paralyzing process. I wonder if you understand this. It's a shock to it. Does somebody understand this? Because we're going to ask presently whether the brain itself can be absolutely quiet. You understand? Not your body, not your breathing, not your eyes and thought. The brain itself, which is constantly chattering, constantly thinking about this, that, and the other. Whether that very brain cells can be absolutely quiet. So we must understand the nature of time. That is, psychologically, inwardly, we are caught in a network of time. I'm going to die. I'm afraid. I shall be. I have been. And I remember the happy things or the painful things. And the brain is functioning, living in time. Right? You can see this yourself, this obvious fact. So part of meditation is to find out for oneself whether time can stop. Not, you can't do this saying that time must stop. It has no meaning. But to understand the whole structure and the nature and the depth of this question. Right?